Welcome to the Network Engineering Video Blog. I'm your host, Michael Crane. So, I was reading a Cisco, actually I heard about a Cisco vulnerability, and where iOS and iOS XE has a CMP Telnet issue, and CMP is cluster management, actually it's CMP, not CMP. This cluster management protocol, and I wasn't too concerned about it because, and we'll look at the network drawing here in a minute, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit. The actual name of it, I have to read it to you. I didn't want to write it all out, and it's not really very descriptive either. In Cisco's official vulnerability critical alert, but it's called Cisco iOS and iOS XE Software Cluster Management Protocol Remote Code Execution Vulnerability. And for some reason, I have a hard time saying vulnerability. But anyway, but yeah, it has to do with Telnet, and I actually wasn't even going to read this. My 3750 isn't on. Oh, and it affects catalyst switches. There's you have to go on. I'll link in the post to the Cisco site where you can read more about it and check to see if your catalyst is on there. But like I was saying, I don't have mine on the public network, so I'm not too worried about it. It's all on the private. It's behind a router. So I wasn't even going to read it. Then I said, well, let me take a look at it, and I was kind of reading through it, and something popped out that I found very, very interesting, and I wanted to. And what was interesting about it, and I'll tell you what it is later. I'm going to keep you in suspense right now, but is it's not on the routers. This behavior, it's only on the catalyst switches, and I actually stubbed my toe with this. I was very surprised. So if you don't know what the cluster management is, or what clustering switches are, is so if you have a switch, it's got a couple ports. They're called stackwise ports, and it's and what it's for is so you can basically daisy chain these guys. And this one right here, something like that. And what's nice about that is so instead of having to manage 3 different switches, let's say if this one is your master, all you have to do is log on to this switch to manage all 3 of them, and it'll send commands down these stackwise ports. And these are not regular Ethernet cables. I'm not really sure. I didn't look up what kind of cable it is, or what kind of connector it is. It's some high density connector, but apparently it's using some kind of IP, because they're using Telnet to send commands to the different from the master to the different switches and back, I guess. That would be okay if it was just restricted to these ports, but apparently if you have an Ethernet port that's going out to the public IP, the internet, then someone can actually send CMP messages to this port, and they don't even have to log in. And you can actually reboot this thing and do all kinds of bad things on there. So anyway, and that's what the problem is, and the fix is actually pretty simple. You just turn off Telnet, and so it doesn't accept Telnet. But there's a gotcha there, and we're going to take a look at that. Okay, so let's take a look at our network drawing real quick that we've been working on off and on throughout the series of videos. And here's our router right here, and the router is usually facing the public network, or the internet, if you will. And then it comes down and it goes through a built-in switch, and then it comes into this Catalyst Ethernet switch right here. This is a Catalyst 3750. And so as you can see, in my management interface is still on a private network, so there's no public access for any hackers to really get in there and try to attack this. So like I said, I wasn't worried about it, but I figured we'd go over it because I found a gotcha that if you do have a Catalyst switch that is connected and you're using it as like a router, because a lot of Catalyst switches you can set up to do layer 3 routing, and if you got it plugged in right into the public network here, you're gonna have a problem. So or you could have a problem. So anyway, so let's take a look at this alert. So here's the alert, and like I said, I'll put this this URL for this alert in the comments below, and you can read through this thing. It's quite lengthy, as you can see, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. Yeah, so it's the vulnerability in the Cisco Cluster Management Protocol processing code and iOS and Cisco iOS XE software could allow an unauthenticated remote attacker to cause a reload of an affected device or remotely execute code with elevated privileges. And what that means in Cisco's ease is they can send commands to port 23 of your router. And port 23 is a default port for Telnet. And I'm not exactly sure they're using port 23. They could be using something different. They don't really go into the details because they don't want, you know, to they're not going to tell you how to hack this, because then they're afraid that there's going to be too many people going after Catalyst switches. Anyway, so yeah, so here's the Telnet internal signaling that we were talking about earlier, and this is just talking about, you know, what I was saying. You have to disable Telnet, and then there's also some other problem with processing malformed CMP specific options. Like I said, they don't really go into any details on this because they don't want people trying it on public Catalyst switches. So anyway, and you can go through here and find your switch, and the easiest way to do it, this list is super long. So I just did a search for mine and found it and said, yeah, it's got it. I had no doubt it didn't have it. And then it talks about, you know, checking for the presence of CMP subsystem, which they go on saying you have to, I guess, have a license for it in the XE switches, but since ours is just regular iOS, ours is always on. So, and this is how you check it. And I won't go through. We could do this, but it doesn't really do anything. Well, let's look at it. Here's our switch here. Oh, yeah, I forgot to use their pipe command. By the way, if you don't know what this is, it's kind of like a Unix or Linux thing. It just basically says, it's saying show subsystem class protocol, and this lists them all. And then this is a pipe command, which means send it to this command. Include means only show the lines that have And this little caret is kind of like a regular expression thing that starts with CMP. And as you can see, this line right here starts with CMP, so that's why it's the only one that showed up. And like I knew, it wasn't. It was in there. So anyway, so let's look at the config real quick, because I want to look at this. So I'll do a show config, and see right down here. This is where you set it up, and if you watch my previous video when we set it up, I only turned on the transport for SSH, right? And I only turned it on for the VTYS stands for virtual terminals 0 through 4. So basically 5 virtual terminals. So you could have a maximum of 5 SSH sessions. And on the other 10, it's not turned on. If you look at the router, do a show config on the router, it should be set up fairly similar. Yeah, so line VTY 0 through 4, transport SSH, and well, that's pretty much it. So without turning on this transport, I assumed it would behave similar to the router, and this is the gotcha. So if we try to telnet, let's open up a new session here. Let's try going to the router first, and we're going to just try telnet, and it just basically exited out. I couldn't drag it. It popped up on my window for a second and then just disappeared. Okay, so I opened up a telnet window just to kind of show you that what kind of error I get. So you can see I'm trying to get to 192.168.1.75, which is the router, and I get nothing. And so like, and I'm going to port 23, and I kind of showed you earlier. So let's try that same thing, and new session. Except let's go to the Ethernet switch. Let's say load telnet. So it's going to go to port 23. And I don't want it to close the window because it just exits all the time. Oops, never. And open that. See, it keeps popping up, and look at that. Right in. Even though I haven't even turned on the transport for telnet. So to turn on a transport for telnet, usually you do, you know, config T line VTY 0 through 4, and then transport. Oh, then transport. Input. And then you can do all protocols, none, SSH, or telnet, right? And so I didn't enable telnet. I didn't set it for all. So I assumed it defaulted to none. But I would have assumed incorrectly, because its actual default is to just let the whole world in, which is not the case in the router. And this is the gotcha I was trying to, that I was referring to earlier, is I actually didn't know this. Usually, if you don't turn on the transport, you don't. It's not going to work. Its default is not wide open. So and I could show you on this, but I'm not going to, because then I'd have to plug a console back in and prove it to you. And if you want to go test it, you can, but I'll guarantee you, if you don't set this, you won't be able to SSH into this. Plus, in the router, you also have to generate the RSA key and all that other fun stuff, which I did in another video. So, so yeah, this is a gotcha here. It even got me.
So it defaults to all on. And so on the config, so like, and I don't know if you can, I don't think you can delete those out. It looks like it already stuck a login, a password. I did not configure this, line 5 through 15. It defaulted, it did some default thing right here. The only thing I configured was VTYS 0 through 4. So the default is to just turn everything wide open. And so I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, and I tested it, and sure enough. So so now what we need to do is config T, and we'll say let's do these guys right here first, and we're gonna say oops, input oh, sorry, it's transport input none. All right. So now let's look at a show config. Okay. So let's see if that fixed it, or if we actually have to this should stop it right here. I would be surprised if you configured input SSH and it, I mean, I guess I could have put SSH here too, but I don't really need it, so I'd rather just turn it off. And because I don't know what other vulnerabilities are in this thing. So let's give that a whirl and see if that fixes it for us. So let's see, new session. We want to go to the Ethernet switch, but we want to use Telnet. We don't want it to close the window so we can see what's going on. And oop. Yeah, see, now it's behaving. So yeah, see now it's behaving like the router. So that's good. So we basically just turned off all Telnet access to it. So yeah, so this is a gotcha right here. This just leave. You would think it would default to none, and it defaults to all. So I just wanted to bring that up and show everybody. One last thing I wanted to show you was this guide right here, and I'm not going through this guide with you. I just wanted, I'll put the link into it down in the comments. But this guide talks about how to harden your Cisco devices, and this is good to go through. Like I said, I'm not going to go through it with you. This thing is long, and if we did a blog, if I was trying to do a blog on security, that would be all we would be doing blogs on, because the security is just endless. They have whole departments assigned to security in large networks. So yeah, I'm not going to go down that path, but I will show you some of the gotchas when they pop up, like this one right here. See, I thought I was okay, and I didn't even consider looking at it for a couple reasons. You know, one, it's in a private network, but this was a shocker, and it was actually in this document right here, and it's a good thing I read it, because I would have never known. Anyway, so but if you want to look at you know, how to secure your routers and your Ethernet switches, this would probably be a good read right before bed, I'm sure. And another thing to also keep in mind is the routers and the Ethernet switches do not behave the same way. Cisco bought Catalyst some years back, and the Catalyst switch originally had completely different command sets. So I don't know what they did. They put a iOS wrapper around it, so it looked and smelled the same as the router commands, but sometimes they don't work the same. So anyway, I hope you liked that video, and I hope it's useful to you. I wanted to keep it short and simple, and just show you that one little gotcha. So if you like it, give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see you later.